Coming up next, I get to interview Brad Formsma, who created an incredible movement called I Like Giving. It's a website and also now a book in which he collects these incredible stories of people who have given to the 15 feet of space around them. Brad, hi. Now this is your new home, Orange County, California. You just moved out here from Michigan. Of course, you've done a lot of amazing things in the world of giving, and you have a kind of a fascinating take on giving. But let's hear a little bit of your story.
My grandfather was a businessman. He had a bakery. And so in this bakery, he had a small private little area that he would make just 16 loaves of bread at a time. So I started tagging along with him on Saturday mornings. And he'd make these loaves of bread, and then in the afternoon, we'd bring them around to shut-ins or people of influence or wealth. And it was just, he was giving. He would sometimes have a monetary gift connected to it, but a lot of times he just gave the gift of presence. And so I early on saw giving modeled to me from him. It's so important to realize that one story can impact the world.
Yeah.
And when we're thinking about our giving, it isn't just us. We don't know who's watching. And I would say to anybody, if your kids and your grandkids don't know where you give and why, if you're still breathing, just make an attempt to do that, because it's where you're going to be able to share your heart better than anything. You know, my grandpa showed me a list of places that he gave.
Yeah.
And you know, that gives you a perspective to where their treasure is, their heart will be also. You can learn so much about somebody as to where they give and why.
Yeah.
And it creates such a dynamic conversation. It's part of a legacy.
Yeah, yeah. Brad, I've heard your book is awesome. I'm really looking forward to reading it. This is the copy you gave me, thank you. Why did you write this book, and why should people read it?
Well, I wrote the book to move people to action, but I also wrote it to give them new perspective on giving. A lot of us have wrong thinking on giving. I certainly did growing up. I thought it was a certain percentage. I thought that it needed to all go in one location under one roof.
Yeah.
And the reality of it is that giving is life-changing. Giving changes everything. I mean everything. Have you ever met a couple who is, they're both generous and they're getting a divorce? It just doesn't happen. You know, even, it just affects every area of our life. And so I wanted to bring a new perspective, this kind of new kind of generosity to the world, that giving starts with how we think about others, and it translates that into what we say to others, how we view other people, how we share our stuff. In fact, it makes me think of a time I was sharing at a church, and I got introduced as the giving guy, and that's what Dave Ramsey calls me, and I'm whatever. Okay, so the giving guy, the pastor says, the giving guy is here to talk. And I get up, and there's a guy, arm folded, halfway back, and I can kind of remember him. And I started to talk about giving in the new perspective that it was. Well, 2 days later, he sent in a story, I Like Holiday Inn. And he talked about being in the lobby and seeing a family there, a mom and 3 kids. And those kids were well behaved, but there's a stress about the mom. And he just said to the lady at the front desk, ma'am, what's going on over there? She said, well, they just came from an abusive home situation. They don't know where to go. They just walked through the door. I don't know what to do with them. And he said, I want to take care of that. And he swiped his credit card for the room and gave him a couple $100 in cash, but said, don't blow my cover. I'm just going to slip off to the side. The next morning, there was a note waiting for him at the front desk. And that note said, sir, I know you didn't want to be identified, but just before you came in, I prayed, God, if you're real, if you're there, this would be a good time to show up.
Wow.
I Like Holiday Inn. This is a guy who then went in to confess to his pastor, I stopped giving here years ago because I'd been offended about a building campaign. And my giving is now reignited. I can't wait to experience the joy of giving again. And I think there's a lot of people out there that have just shut it off. And I want to say, no, it's a new day. It's a new perspective. And he's thanking I Like Giving and thanking me for telling him to just look around and be aware. You know, We all have something to give, Bobby. That's so important to grab a hold of. I often hear, well, when I get more money, or if I was a millionaire.
Yeah.
But the reality of it is, we can all pay a compliment.
Yeah.
We can all give some time.
Yeah.
So wherever we are, we can start to give today. And I think it only increases. Like you mentioned Dave Ramsey, and if you look at those steps, he has us giving all the way through.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
it's not like, I'll do it later.
Yeah.
Start now.
I know, I often hear people say, you know, in a religious context, for me as a pastor, people will say things like, someday I'm going to give when I make more money, you know, or sometimes they'll even say it to God, like, God, I'll give more when you give me more money. And I almost feel like God's saying, I'll give you more money when you start giving.
Exactly.
Like, there's
that is so
really
right.
is something to
that
it, you know.
is so true.
It's also sort of like prove it to God, you know, like, why, if you're not going to give, you know, money now to a person in need, a neighbor, of your time, if you're not going to volunteer, if you're not, whatever, why would I think you would give later?
Yeah. This is an area that is so not talked about in faith circles, other than from a duty perspective.
Yeah.
And I want to bring the context of, we get to give, we don't got to give. I want to get families talking about giving around the table. I want them to watch a film and have a conversation. What stood out to you?
Yeah.
You learn from your 8-year-old and your 12-year-old, and it's a new conversation.
I love that you think of giving not as duty, but as the way to live life, and something that's creative and spontaneous, and you never know when the next opportunity is going to come, and you look at it as an opportunity, don't you?
Absolutely. You
Yeah.
know, I always say
It's cool.
these daily, weekly, monthly opportunities to give and do for others,
Yeah.
life-changing.
Yeah.
Giving will get you out of a bad mood. Giving will pull you out of depression. Giving will help you live longer and take less medicine.
Yeah.
What else do we need?
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you, Brad. I so appreciate it. I'm looking forward to reading your book. And of course, people can check out your website at ilikegiving.com and even share their stories. That's
Well,
great.
thank you for having me, Bobby. You know, it's God's nature. So it's wired into all of us.
Yeah.
And I think we get debt and busy and fear come over that. It's God's nature. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Brad.